They say the truth will set us free, but not until we identify the lies that hold us hostage. I'm Amy, your host for The Story in My Head, a raw, meandering, unscripted sharing of my thoughts or those of my guests, where we identify the stories, the messages that we tell ourselves that create these lies that we believe, that trap us in darkness and depression, anxiety, fear, negative thinking, self-sabotage, addiction, etc. This is my experiment of trying to rewrite the stories in my head, and I ask you to join me. We were all born with different gifts, personality traits, talents, and I believe that I was born with the gift of gab. I talk all the time. When I'm not talking, people ask me if I'm okay. And yes, most of the time I am. I'm just thinking, which in effect is talking to myself. And I can't pay attention to the stories in my head without honestly looking at the whole way that I communicate with myself, not just the stories, not just the what if this, what if that, but also the wording that I choose when I'm speaking to myself or somebody else. I believe all of these talents and skills and gifts that we have can be used either to our benefit or maybe to our detriment, depending on the situation. They can be blessings or curses. You know, everything is a double-edged sword. So, for example, my gift of gab has served me well for many, many years. It's the way I made a living and provided for my children. It also got me in trouble in school when I was little and can be really obnoxious and mess up some of my social interactions. So this gift of gab I have and this storytelling that I have going on in my head, when I'm in dark spaces, the way I speak to myself, the way I utilize my gift is really damaging. I say things to myself, both inside and like inward and outwardly, that are extremely insulting and degrading. And a lot of times the things I say are not even true. You know, I believe in the power of the story we tell ourselves. Obviously, I am also sitting here thinking about when I say things out loud, the power that comes with that. When I call myself ridiculous or say, oh my gosh, I had this crazy idea, or oh my gosh, I was being so stupid, or any of these things that I say with, you know, multiple times a day with very little thought. But the thing is, I think it right before I say it, and then I speak it out loud, and I'm also hearing myself. So it's like a triple whammy. I think it, I speak it, I hear it. There's power now in that word, ridiculous, crazy, stupid, lazy, whatever it is that I have just said to myself and the way I've just described to myself. And when I'm in a dark space, the things I say are like, Amy, you know, you're a failure, and Amy, you've missed your mark. You've passed your prime. You've screwed up. There's just no hope. Gosh, you're just really not capable, and you haven't worked out, and now you're fat, and you know, all this time has passed and you've wasted it, and you're just so wasteful. And I just say these things, and sometimes I say them out loud to other people. I mean, I have heard myself recently, somebody asked me how I was doing, and I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I'm still a little stressed and a little chubby, and I blah, 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 blah. So the story in my head has now bubbled out to this person, and, you know, my stress level and my weight was probably not at all part of the story in their head. It is now, you know, because I've put it on the table, and it was unnecessary. And I don't even know why I do that. And I hear other people do it. And as I'm listening to the story in my head and the what ifs that are negative and the verbiage that I use that is so insulting and blah, 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 I'm just kind of stuck. I need to pause for a moment. Because maybe looking at the whole story today is too much. Maybe today I just need to look at the words themselves, the words. I was in elementary school, and I was going to my grandmother's that afternoon, or it's a woman that I referred to as my grandmother. And when I got off the bus, I saw my grandmother standing on the porch with her hands on her hips, and she looked pissed. And I got off the bus, and instead of the usual greeting of, hey, baby, how was your day? How was your sandwich? Blah, blah, blah. It was, young lady, you have something you want to tell me? And I start scanning all of my behaviors from the last 24 or 48 hours. What have I done? I'm also, contemplating what she could possibly have found out about. Because, that's really a solid question we ask ourselves when we think we're in trouble. What does that person know? And before I could even finish scanning, she said, I heard you called your brother a fool. And she was just terribly disappointed. She opened the screen door. She just pointed for me to go in. And as I was walking in the door, she said, I need you to grab the pillow off the bed and meet me on the back porch. I was a child. I did not question authority. I did start crying because I was thinking to myself, the story in my head was, oh my God, I'm going to have to sleep outside tonight. This is my punishment for calling my brother a fool. I'm going to have to sleep outside tonight. And I went and I got my pillow, and I was very hesitant and reluctant, and I met her on the porch, and she was holding a pair of scissors. And then I was like, oh God, the story went sideways with a quickness, but I watched her cut the top of the pillow off and then hand me the pillow. At the time, I was sleeping on a feather pillow, a real one, the ones that poked you in the face at night as the feathers came through. I loved that pillow. And she handed me this pillow and just roughly, gruffly said, shake all the feathers out of it. Get them gone. So I did. And they were piling on the porch, and they were starting to blow off and kind of waft around. And I knew not to look at the feathers. I knew my grandmother was incredibly disappointed. I knew I needed to reflect that same disappointment. So I just looked at my feet, tears streaming down my face. And when I got all the feathers out of the pillowcase, I just kind of slowly looked up at her, and she said, now go out there and pick them all up, put them back in the pillow, and bring it inside, and I'll stitch it back up. And then she just walked inside. She just walked in, just gone. What? So I started picking them up and putting them back in the pillowcase, and I don't know how long I was out there, a long time. The sun was moving across the sky. I'd get distracted by watching them blow around in the wind. I'd probably pick up a frog or two along the way, but I was doing the best I could to grab these feathers and stick them back in. They were mostly out of my reach. I'm 5 foot tall now, so I was probably 2.5 feet tall, maybe 2 feet tall at the time. There was no way in the world I could reach the majority of these things because the wind had picked several up and put them in the trees. There were feathers in this holly bush, and that's pokey. I was not going to get those, and I knew I was going to have to go in and tell my grandmother I couldn't get all the feathers, and then that was going to be yet another disappointment. I mustered up the courage because I had to. I grabbed my pillowcase. I brought it in with maybe 1/10 of the feathers that it originally held. I set it on the kitchen table, and I just started crying. I said, I can't get all the feathers. I can't. There's pokey bushes, and they're way up high, and I can't get them. And my grandmother was holding a cast iron frying pan, and she slammed that thing on the oven, and that sound resonated throughout the kitchen. And she said, exactly. And those feathers are just like your words. Once they are out there, you can never get them back. So in my dark space, I'm thinking through the way I speak to myself and the horrible things. I'm ugly, and I'm fat, and I'm old, and I'm crotchety, and I'm depressed, and I'm anxious, and like all these things that I say on the daily, sometimes out loud. They're in there. They're stuck. They're in my brain. They're there, and I can't get them back out. And how many times have I said these things? How many times have I said nice things to myself as compared to how many times I've said shitty things to myself? I suspect if there's more positive things in the brain, I will have a more positive outlook. That's my what if for today. What if the positives in my brain outweigh the negatives? And I think it's possible that our brains are programmed to really pay a lot of attention to the negatives because it's how we keep ourselves safe, which means I'm going to need a whole lot more positives in number to outweigh the effects the weight of the negatives. I got some work to do. I was sitting in Krispy Kreme with my mother one day, one of her favorite things to drink coffee and chat with the locals, and I was usually mouthy because I was bored out of my mind, and a gentleman called me obtuse one day. He said, "You are the most obtuse child I have ever met." I think he actually used the word brazen. I don't know. One or the other. They both probably applied, but I just remember thinking, I have no idea what those words mean, but I could tell by his tone I was not supposed to say thank you. That was not going to be appropriate. And I just said, I don't know what those words mean. I don't know what that means. It was brazen. That's exactly what it was. I said, I don't know what that means. And he was like, look it up. Well, I wasn't going to do that because I was too lazy to do that. There. I wasn't lazy. I'm not lazy. I didn't want to do that. I did not want to spend my energy looking up the word brazen. There we go. Rewrite. Anywho, a week later, I'm in the kitchen with my family having dinner. I called my brother brazen. And my mom said, well, what does that mean? And I was like, I don't know. And she said, Amy, never, ever, ever use words you don't know what they mean because that could be dangerous. Dangerous? What? I'm like 12 years old or something. In my head, something that's dangerous means if I do it, I'm at risk of getting injured. So I felt like the madre was being a bit dramatic, so I dismissed it and went on about, my life. And being, not wise with my words at all. 19 years old, I had just left a therapist's office, and we had been talking about setting boundaries and being assertive and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I went to go buy a pair of jeans, actually 2 pair of jeans to be exact, at this little mom and pop store. Went in, got the jeans, checked out. The lady folded them up, slid them across the counter to me, and I was like, ma'am, can I please have a bag? And she goes, we try not to use bags unless it's necessary. Yeah, that's my imitation of her. We try not to use bags unless it's necessary. And I was like, well, I appreciate that, but I'd like to have a bag. And she said, let me repeat myself. We do not give away bags unless it's necessary, and you only have 2 pair of jeans. Oh my God. Okay. So I don't know exactly what the hell my therapist was talking about boundaries and whatnots, but the assertive part, what I was hearing in my head in that moment was, stick up for yourself, Amy, stick up for yourself. And this woman was smirk and had a tone, and I didn't care for that. And I just blurted out, I need a damn bag. And she goes, ma'am, there is no need for obscenities. To which I responded quickly and loudly, I don't even know what the fuck that word means. I'm just saying I need a damn bag. Well, as I'm being escorted out of the store by security, a man that I didn't know was there. I don't even know if he was security, I don't know. He could have been a patron for all I know. But as I'm standing in the parking lot realizing I've been escorted out of the store, I have embarrassed myself. I have had this verbal altercation with this woman, and she's used this 50-cent word that I don't care for. I don't know what it is. I felt disrespected. I immediately felt all victimized. The story in my head was that this bitch had disrespected me, victimized me, and not given me a damn bag. Mind you, I'm in the parking lot, sans the bag. I am impressed that I even have the jeans after the way I've acted. And I was like, what in the hell? I called my mom. I was like, Mom, here's the deal. This is what happened. She thought that shit was hysterical. Not I. No, I was very frustrated. I was irritated. I was not feeling at all comedic at the time, okay? And after my mom got done laughing at me, she said to me, Amy, obscenities are curse words. And then I replayed the whole thing back in my head, and I was like, oh, yeah. She's like, Amy, you remember how I told you your entire life to watch your words because your words could be dangerous? You could have just gotten yourself in a mess right there with your words. Touche, madre. Touche. I don't know about you, but it takes me a long time to learn a lesson. I get the opportunity to learn the same lesson over and over and over. And I think every time I got it. Yep. Score. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. I have learned. But come to find out, no, I have not, because the opportunity arises again in a slightly different manner, slightly different detail. It's the same opportunity. So fast forward a little bit. I'm in my 20s, and I've always been a bit of a storyteller. I love to tell stories. And, the more exaggerated they are, the more animated, the more dramatic, the more comedic they are, the more of an impression they make. And I was basically running around as though my entire life was a story, and I did not pay much attention to exaggerations and dramatizations, and I certainly did not think that these things were dangerous. Well, come to find out, a very, very dear friend of mine, she disagreed. Because through my inaccurate storytelling, through my exaggerations, through my dramatizations, what she experienced was me being dishonest. And it happened so often and so frequent that she came to a place that she could no longer trust me. And this was the very first time. I knew my words were valuable. I knew they were important. I knew that you could get yourself into a hot mess with them. But I didn't really ever truly understand until then how my words, can be harmful to others, dangerous. Not necessarily like I'm going to get injured, but like I might get myself in a situation that I cannot get out of, or getting out of it is going to be difficult or painful or just somehow costly because I am reckless with my words. And here I am curled up in a ball on the couch in a very dark space, telling myself that I am worthless and I am failure and I am poor and I am ugly and I am hateful and I am all these things. This is dangerous. I did my best to raise 2 sons into 2 men. And throughout the way, we would use tools to build this or do that. And I always said to my children, guys, these are tools. Okay, these are not toys. Which means we have to be careful. We have to learn how to use them correctly, not only to be safe, but to be efficient. We don't want to hurt ourselves. We don't want to hurt anybody else. And we want to use these tools to help us do the best job that we can do with whatever this project is that we're working on. And it's taken me a long time to really understand, to the best of my ability to today, that my words are tools. I don't walk up and down the street slinging a hammer around. We are standing there and somebody's slinging around a hammer. We're going to back the fuck up because that's a dangerous person. But we sling our words around willy-nilly, and it's dangerous. I don't know what's right. The older I get, the more I realize I don't know. I do know that I like to think of myself as a scientist because I like to run experiments. So I'm going to run another experiment, and I'm just going to pay attention to how I speak to myself. The words that I'm going to try to catch the harsh words and the insulting and the exaggerated, the words that I say that are untrue when I call myself stupid or lazy or fat or ridiculous or a failure or whatever. Those things are not true. Just because I feel them, just because I feel like a failure doesn't mean I am a failure. I'm just going to watch my words. And I'm just going to practice being gentler, kinder, more tender with my verbiage, with myself. Anywho, they say at the end of a podcast, you're supposed to ask people to do things like subscribe or click or follow, or so I don't even know what I'm talking about. So, and if you were to do those things, that would be great, and I'd appreciate it because it would support me, and that's exciting. I'd rather ask you to join me in the experiment of paying attention to how I speak to myself. I'm going to practice being kinder. I challenge you to do the same.